So first of all, do you have any questions today about text-to-speech? What is it that you're hoping to get out of this? And so if you'll notice when you are on this Pear Deck, it's going to allow you to type in a question or a question that you might have. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to write any questions you might have so that I can see if we can address those during the session today. Thank you for those that are responding. So I'm going to read a few of these out. I'm excited to learn new things about text-to-speech, how to use text-to-speech. My son's teacher said he learns better by listening and not by reading. And then, is it effective for learning as handwriting out answers? And so that actually addresses a common misconception is there's two terms out there, text-to-speech, which is where you hear the computer or an audio read aloud to you. And then there is speech-to-text, where you speak into a microphone and it turns that into written text. We are going to be having a session on speech recognition or speech to text later on today at 16:20 or 4:20. And so is it as effective as reading? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as we move forward. And so I would also like to know now, what grade is your child or children? It only gives you one response. So if you have multiple children, what is the grade of the child that you are really thinking about text-to-speech right now, or that might benefit, or you have questions that they might benefit from text-to-speech? So I'm saying we have some middle school, upper elementary, terrific. Some high school. So today we're going to identify some potential benefits. We're going to talk about strategies and just what tools are out there and how to use some of those tools. So another question for you here. How are things going right now within the virtual schools? And with this question, you can draw a little smile. You can draw a circle around the smiley face you want. You can type in an answer, but just real quick, how are your students doing, or your children doing right now within the virtual school environment with the reading tasks that are being asked of them? I'm seeing some smiley faces, some sad faces, in between. So across the board, we have a wide range, and that's the nice thing about text-to-speech is it does give us some different options based off of the task. So why text-to-speech? Well, one thing we know when we talk about text-to-speech is it's called an accessibility tool. It makes reading more accessible to those who might struggle with reading. And we do know when we look at research that kids with disabilities or kids that struggle with these tasks do better when they use accessible tools. We see higher graduation rates. We see more success later in life. We see greater success with post-secondary jobs. So when we're looking at text-to-speech, it is one feature out of many that can benefit students as they are moving forward and on with their lives. So what is text-to-speech? It's digital text converted into spoken words. There are two types of text-to-speech that your children or you might have been exposed to. One is digital. That's like your Audible, where it's a professionally narrated voice, your voice actor who records themselves reading a book. You see this a lot with novels, where somebody will read aloud each chapter. You can skip back and forth. You can access these through your base library. You might have a subscription to Audible. You might have old CDs or books on CD or books on tape sort of thing. Some benefits of that is that more people tend to like the sound of the voices. The downside, though, is that not every book is professionally narrated. Not every Google document, Google Classroom web page out there has some professional voice actor that is reading everything aloud for you or your child. So that is one downside. And the other is it's not as adjustable. So in terms of speaking rate, in terms of being able to jump back and forth, it's a little bit more clunky sometimes to navigate a lot of text with that digital format. Now, we also have synthesized. And synthesized, that's your robot voice. That's where we use, you type something in and it will then read it aloud, and you can type whatever you want in and then it will read it aloud. The benefit of that is it's super flexible. It'll read anything and everything. The downside is that it is robot voices. And I will say the voices are getting better, and there's a lot of variety and choices for voices. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to find the right one, the right pitch, and the right speed for you or your child, but it can pay off. And I will kind of put a plug out there throughout this session that just because we don't like a voice doesn't mean that it's still not helpful to us as readers to be able to listen to it. So sometimes we hear that, oh, I don't like to listen to the computer voices. It's important that we look at that, but do we see a benefit, an increase in independence and reading level? Do we see that those voices still can help a child access something they might not be able to on their own? So if you had a choice, would you rather listen to digital text, the professionally narrated, or the synthesized? We're hearing a lot of that. It's interesting. I was working with a student once, and it was a professional voice actor, but he had a British accent. And so the students, even though it was a professional actor doing this book or reading this book aloud, they didn't like it because they couldn't understand the thick British accent. So it is interesting what kids like. And then sometimes I've had kids that'll report that once they get used to using text to speech, they like the robot voice better because they can go back and listen to it over and over again when they don't feel like they're being a burden to the adult that's having to read it aloud. And oftentimes those materials aren't in digital format, unfortunately, in terms of that professional voice. So there are some tips. We just can't say, here's text to speech, go out, have fun, and be happy with the results. We need to know what tools there are. I really encourage that we explore different voices, adjusting the speed. Sometimes when the content is real easy, we want to make that super fast so we can just listen to it, get the content, and move on. We're kind of like brain candy. But sometimes the text is so dense and so complex that we really need to slow it down and really chunk and pay attention to what that content is saying. So we want that speed. Bimodal highlighting. What that means is that I can hear the text, but at the same time, the sentence is highlighted with two colors. So it kind of highlights the main sentence, and then it will highlight the word that it's being read aloud at that time. And that is really great for our kids that struggle with attention. They can hear it and they can see it, and there's something moving across the page, and it helps sometimes keep interest and that attention component to some of this longer text. We want to read with purpose. Sometimes when kids are first introduced to text-to-speech, they see it as like a start-finish process where I turn on text-to-speech, I listen to it till it stops, I go tell my teacher, my parents that I'm finished, and I move on. We really want to say that we're still reading. We want to make those connections. We want to understand the concept. We want to understand the vocabulary. We want to make those connections to other things we've read or listened to or watch or things that are going on in our life. We just can't have it where, stop, start, or start, stop, where there's no process involved with it. And then check for understanding. We have a lot of kids that'll listen to text-to-speech, and again, they say, hey, I finished it. But you ask, well, what did you just read? Or what was it? Did you have any questions? Or what went well? And they were passive listeners versus active and employing comprehension strategies. And so it's really important that we teach those skills as we move forward. And these are some things that we've seen through research that text-to-speech can help. We talked about that with that bimodal highlighting. It can help with attention. For kids that struggle with decoding, Think about your brain as having 100% amount of your resources. And if you're having to spend 80% of your resources on decoding the words, blending the words, that only leaves 20% for figuring out what the word means, how that story goes together, that concept, making those connections we're talking about. So what this can sometimes do is reduce the need for that decoding, so it frees up that cognitive resource so that I can spend more of my energy, more of my thoughts on understanding the text and not just decoding it. So we can see that it helps with comprehension. Some kids are great readers. They're just super slow. And it takes them twice as long to read as other kids in their class. And it just means that homework assignment or that reading assignment now takes twice as long. So sometimes text-to-speech can be used just to help the kids keep up with the amount of work. And we see this especially in our middle school and high school as the reading tasks increase significantly. This can just sometimes help kids who are good readers just read more with less fatigue. Some kids are more motivated when they can listen to it. We also see with writing that text-to-speech can improve editing. So you write something on a Google Doc or a word processing document, and if they can listen to it, they can often find a lot of the errors that they wouldn't find if they were just doing it on their own. And then it does help access the different curricular tools that we have out there. So as you're looking at all these benefits, what are you most interested in or most excited for the potential for your child? And so you can drag the icon, the thumbs up, to any one of these bulleted stars. What are you most excited about? Reducing fatigue, higher comprehension, motivation, access to materials, sustaining attention. Good. And so this one tool can meet a lot of those needs. Thank you for participating. Higher comprehension. So that's great. There was a question at the very beginning, how does this impact reading? And is it reading if kids can listen to it and then they're comprehending? Yes, kids that are using text-to-speech technology, they are still having to employ comprehension strategies. The computer voices don't read with expression for the most part, and so they have to infer that. They have to add that expression. They might be rereading after they hear it read aloud. They're still having to make those connections in their mind and just making sense and comprehending it all. So it does reduce the decoding component of reading, but decoding is just one facet of reading and reading comprehension. And so your child still does need to employ a lot of strategies to make sense of what they're listening to and reading. And what we do find is kids that can listen to the text and see that highlighting across the page, they are still actively reading with that book, with the highlighting and trying to employ those strategies. So we have a lot of curricular resources within DoDEA. You might, as you've been helping your child, seen some of these. So what I really want to point out quickly is that there is built-in text-to-speech to, I would say, 80 to 90% of the resources that we're using right now within the agency. And so we have the Media Center. So our online database has a ton of resources through Pebble Go Next, which is science, social studies. We have interactive books. We have National Geographic for kids. We have a lot of databases for our middle school and high school students with articles, fiction, nonfiction on a variety of topics, and they're all built in text-to-speech. And the one thing you want to look for is you see that little speaker icon at the bottom. That is what most of these tools have, and that you want to identify and you want your child to identify. One example of this is one of the databases through the Media Center. And if you're interested in learning more about the Media Center, based off of time today, I'm going through this quick. We are having 2 sessions later on this afternoon, actually 3 sessions, hosted by our Media Center ISS, who's going to talk about how to access the databases, how to access a lot of these tools, and then you could find out more about the specific text-to-speech within those tools. But for instance, we have a database that has this little floating toolbar. You can click play and it'll read aloud. You can click on the gearbox, and within that gearbox, you can select enhanced vision, text visibility. And what that does is that takes a website and it actually pulls up this big blue bar and it will read it aloud with highlighting. It makes the font super large, real high interest, visually engaging. So again, for our kids that are struggling with attention, it makes that content pop a little bit more and easier to follow along with. If you're an elementary parent, you might have found that we're using a lot of Benchmark Advance. And so here's we're going to do a little activity for all our parents out there right now, is if you were looking at this Benchmark reading tool, where would you think you would find the play button? So go ahead and drag the icon to where you would see the play button that would have this book read aloud. Yep. And then you'd see, oh, it's going too fast. How would you adjust the speed? Yep, I see all moving over to the left where you see that speed, the plus and the minus. Perfect. Yep, that's where you're looking for. You want to see that you're looking for those play buttons. This is for our HMH collections, which is our ELA program, our ELA curriculum for 612. So within the online HMH collections, there's a little play button down at the bottom and stop. What I also want to point out, and we're going to cover later, is that there's a free reading tool that we call Read and Write for Google that uses something called hover speech that will highlight the text in yellow and will read it aloud with blue highlighting and text to speech as it goes along. It's a free tool for any student, and it works terrifically within HMH collections. So again, you're looking for the speaker, you're looking for a play button, but most our curriculums have it embedded in there. So FOSS Science, this is from their interactive textbook for FOSS Science for K-5. Go ahead and drag the icons. Where do you see the reader icons? Where would you access Read Aloud? Yeah, they're all over the place. You'll even notice these. There's one that has a video, where it'll actually play a little video within the science curriculum. So there are a lot of ways within these curriculums that are made to help kids with reading aloud. And the nice thing is, this is a tool for everyone. This isn't I need to be in special education, I need to be on a 504 plan. If they're using these online curricular tools, they have access to text-to-speech. And this is a question that you then ask your teacher at your school, hey, maybe can you help me? I would like to make sure I'm using the text-to-speech appropriately, or is it okay? Can you help my student access the text-to-speech? But again, most our curricular resources have text-to-speech built in. And if they don't, we use something called that Read and Write toolbar, which I'm going to show at the very top of this. There's a little purple puzzle piece at the very top that says RW. And with that, you select that icon, and it'll bring up a toolbar where I have this hover speech. And again, I just hover my mouse over the text, it highlights it, and it reads aloud. And we're going to show you a little bit more about that. Go Math, it's our K-5 curriculum. Where would you find the text-to-speech within the number line, or the hundreds chart? Where would you see the directions, or where would you access directions there? It is, yep, that blue icon. Yep, perfect. Blue icon. Close. I see somebody going to the gearbox. It's actually on the main page. Yep, good job. You guys found it. And then we have a lesson check on the next tab over is a worksheet. And you'll notice that they have play buttons by every single one of the questions. And so, you can drag your mouse over to one of the play buttons and it would read it aloud to you. And so for students with math, that we want to make sure they understand the concept of the math equation and they're not being inhibited by the reading. And so by using the Go Math resources, it'll read aloud every question, it'll read aloud every worksheet, it reads aloud a lot of the interactive components. So there are a lot of options there. We have something called Bookshare, which we're going to have a session later on today from 5 to 5:30, which I'll go into greater detail, but this is for students with special needs who qualify, and if they are on an IEP or a 504 plan for diagnose barriers in reading, they can qualify for over 800,000 free ebooks that can then be read aloud with text-to-speech. So again, if you're interested in that, we will be covering that session at 5 tonight. And so what are you feeling? Do you think your students, your children will use any of the built-in text-to-speech tools? Maybe. I'm getting a middle face, a yes, a yes, a yes. Okay, good. So we're getting some yeses. Nice. So in the last few minutes, what tools are you using at home? Go ahead, and if you wouldn't mind, what tools do you have access to at home, or do your children have access to? Can you draw a circle around what you're using? So Chrome, Apple, Chrome, good. We're gonna highlight Chrome, Android. I just want to point out that every one of these resources has built-in text-to-speech. And it's as simple as Google searching text-to-speech for iOS, text-to-speech for Android, text-to-speech for Chrome. And there are a lot of resources out there, either built into the operating systems or that could be free or low-cost add-ons to any of these tools. So I encourage you to pick the tool that you're most comfortable with and do a little Google searching and see what is available. Since most of us are using Chrome, I'm going to spend the last couple minutes talking about that. We have Read and Write for Google. It is a toolbar within the Chrome web browser. And if you're using your child's Chrome account right now, you should hopefully see at the very top a Read and Write puzzle piece. If you're using your student's child account right now, do you see it? No? Okay. Yes. So we have some mixed, a couple yes, couple no. All right. To make sure that you've turned it on, you would go to your student's user icon or your child's user icon. It's gonna pull up this little menu bar over here, and you want to make sure that sync is on and that you say yes to every single permission that comes up. Yes, you want to link data. Yes, you want to do that. Yes, you want to do this. We teach our kids all the time to say no to any kind of pop-up, but this is the one instance where we say, go to that Chrome icon, link that data, grant permissions, and then you're ready to go. And with that, you'll then you'll select that icon, and it pulls up this floating toolbar, and you use hover speech, and it will float over it, and it'll read it aloud. And it will read anything on the web, or I'd say 90% of what's on the web. So you use that Read and Write puzzle piece, pulls up the icon, and you're going to use that hover speech. Within that Read and Write toolbar, there's the 3 dots way over on the right-hand side that has the arrow pointing to it. Within that, you can change the voices. There are a lot of voices within there. None of them are 100% perfect, but they're not bad. You can also adjust the speed. So make sure you remember, if your child is saying, I don't like that voice, that doesn't sound right, or that sounds funny, let them play around with the different voices. There's Australian accents, British accents, US. If the child is motivated and they're comprehending, let them go with it. The speed can be adjustable. Sometimes they read faster, sometimes they read slower. There's not a perfect answer for this. It just depends on your child and kind of what they're reading. But it's important to make sure that you remember you can adjust these settings. So real quick, how do your kids do with editing work? When they edit their written work, do they catch all their mistakes? Got a disagree, a couple disagrees. By using Read and Write within Google Docs, you open up Google Docs, you use your purple puzzle piece, you can then select text and it will read it out loud. It's great for the kids to be able to hear their own writing and to correct their own mistakes. Or within those settings, those Read and Write settings, those 3 dots, and then go to that reading, that speak on each word or speak on each sentence, when they write a word, it will read it aloud. Or if they add a punctuation to the end of a sentence, it will then read that sentence out loud to them. And that is a great time for them to listen to what they just wrote and see if they misspelled a word, to see if they forgot a word, to see if it makes sense. So we tend to spend a lot of time on text-to-speech for reading, but it really is a valuable tool when we're looking at it for writing. And this is just some strategies that I typically work with. When I'm working with students, I don't just say, okay, use your text-to-speech, fix your writing. I tend to work with them to say, okay, what is it we want when we're writing? What is it we need to do with the text-to-speech? Okay, when we're listening to our text, what is it that I should be asking myself? We sometimes need to explicitly teach our students or our children how to be good editors. And so this is one checklist that I like to use with students, and we will be sharing the presentation, so you'll have this as well. Reduce the clutter. The free version of Read and Write for Google comes with a ton of options, but most of them are disabled because it's for the premium. We're only using the free version. So what you would do is go to those three dots and go to features, and you can actually get rid of all the features you're not using. So it simplifies the toolbar and makes it a lot easier to use. And for kids that get distracted, having this huge long toolbar on there with all these tools that are grayed out that they're not able to use can sometimes frustrate and distract kids. So I often encourage families to go to those three dots, go to features, and turn off the switches for all the stuff they're not using. The only thing they need is hover speech, play, pause, and stop. Everything else can be disappeared. So what do you think? Do you think your students would use Read and Write for Google within Chrome to help with reading any kind of web page or their Google Docs? I'm getting a yes, a yes, yes. Perfect. We like to see that. Last part here, we talked about reading strategies. Don't just give them text-to-speech and say, here you go. We have to make sure that we are teaching them how to be good readers, how to make those connections. Have patience. It can sometimes take a few months for the child to get used to reading with text-to-speech before they are comfortable with their comprehension. In fact, sometimes we see comprehension goes down at the beginning because they're focused so much on this weird voice and using the program that they're paying less attention to what the words mean. So don't just try it once or twice. Give it, we have 1 month left of school, give or take. Have them try it, really go deep for the next month. See how it goes. And remember that I'm going to switch up. I missed something here. We're going to jump ahead. That we're going to have to sell these. That you are going to be the used car salesman. That kids don't like some of these options. They don't want to be different. They don't like the voices. We have to sell it. We have to make the case that, hey, use your comfortable headphones. Hey, let's see if we can get this on your tablet because we know it's more comfortable to read on your tablet than on a laptop. Hey, what do you think you need? How can we help you with this? But you really have to go at it proactively, be excited about it, sell it, because if you're not excited about it, they're not going to be excited about it. And oftentimes we see kids that are just like, nah, I don't want to use it. But if we can make the case and help them see the benefits of text-to-speech, we can help them kind of get used to the robot voices, used to these added tools, because they can really see the benefit that, wow, I can read so much more. My writing is so much better. I need a lot less help, or I do the same amount of work, but in half the time. And so that's really what the takeaway is from this, is that text-to-speech can really help your child have the potential to increase their reading, their writing, and their independence. But it does take a little bit of effort.